Not quite yet. Okay. Well, welcome everyone to our fourth and final Borders and Migrations talk for spring 2021. I want to take a moment to acknowledge the events of today and to be mindful of the guilty verdict that was just reached in the Chauvin case, and to be mindful of the fact that violence continues to occur throughout our society and along our borders as well, and that this initiative of Borders and Migrations is part of our efforts to raise awareness about that and to make a world that is more just and equal. I want to thank our sponsors for our series, in particular for this evening's talk, which includes the Department of Modern Languages, Literatures, and Cultures. And within that, our CEEP, Canisius Earning Excellence Program scholars, which includes Emily Smards, Hannah Kim, and in particular, Corey Chervin, who is our tech guru. We've also received funding for this through the Kosciuszko Foundation, the Permanent Chair of Polish Culture, the Vice President for Academic Affairs at Canisius College, the Office of Campus Ministry at Canisius College, the Office of Mission and Identity at Canisius. And I want to also thank the Borders and Migrations Initiative Committee for their work on multiple aspects of the series of events. I especially want to honor and acknowledge my frequent collaborator and the inspiration for much of my work, my now former colleague, Sarah Signorino, who is sadly no longer with the college. I want to thank her in particular for all that she has done for me and for the Borders and Migrations Initiative. For those who are watching the live stream, if you have questions, you can submit them via text to 716-249-6816. Also, the event is being recorded and will be available on the webpage for Borders and Migrations for viewing at any time. And I would also encourage people to check out Spanish at Canisius and look for the upcoming alumni magazine, which will feature this talk as well. And finally, I would like to encourage people to plan ahead for the fall series of Borders and Migrations events, which will include a talk with the UN High Commissioner on Refugees, a talk on data collection and archives. We will also feature local people who will talk about their experience of detention in Batavia and their subsequent release into the community. We will have a speaker on sanctuary cities, and also a segment on providing healthcare to the local refugee population here in Buffalo. To introduce tonight's speaker, I invite my colleague, Dr. Stefanski, who will introduce tonight's speaker. Margaret.
Good evening, everyone. So this is a privilege to give a very warm welcome to Dr. Szklarski, to Dr. Bohdan Szklarski. He's an associate professor of political science, graduate of the English Institute at the Warsaw University and the Department of Political Science at Northwestern University in Boston. In his over 30 years of teaching, he has taught at numerous American and Polish universities. He served as a director of the American Studies Center at University of Warsaw in the years 2012-2016. Now he is the head of the leadership studies at the American Studies Center. He also lectures at Collegium Civitas, a non-public college of social sciences. He guest lectured at many universities in the US, China, South Korea, Germany, Italy, France, Greece, Czech Republic, Georgia, Vietnam, and I believe also Spain. Professor Szklarski's research interests include political leadership, political communication, American political culture and institutions, comparative politics, and political anthropology. Author of over 60 academic publications, he frequently appears as a commentator on American and Polish political events in the media. Privately, he's a fan of Bruce Springsteen, American football, and long walks with his golden retrievers. This is the last passion I definitely share with Dr. Szklarski. So this semester, we are really privileged to host Dr. Szklarski here in Buffalo. He teaches courses on Polish history and Polish politics at Canisius College and Damon College. So welcome, Dr. Szklarski, and thank you all for being here with us tonight.
Thank you very much. Hello, everybody. Thank you for the very kind and generous invitation, which kind of sets the bar high, because if it's I'm a last speaker in the sequence, so I have to do at least as well as my predecessors. Yes, and it's a great honor for me and privilege also to be here at Canisius and Damon, and to do academic work and my own research, and also to interact with my colleagues at both of these universities. And I'm thankful for the very pleasant atmosphere, academic and non-academic, that I've been greeted with here. And it's I hope it's my first stay here in Buffalo, but maybe not the last one. So, and at the very end, I can only add that I also have, for the cat people, because I know the audience usually is divided into dog people and cat people, I also have 2 cats at home. So it's that might predispose the cat people more favorably to me. So so that's the formal part. The academic part is, I hope you can all see the front page of my presentation, which will be devoted to the discussion of kind of Polish political culture and the condition of democracy in 30th year of building democracy, consolidating democracy in Poland. And we're going to look at it through the prism of the issue of immigration and populism, and the troubled relations between these 2 concepts, which are making Polish democracy, which expose the vulnerability of Polish democracy. But as you hopefully will see, will survive till the end of the presentation, I'm going to involve American situation in our talk, and compare the sensitivities, compare the policies, and if I can reveal, a little spoiler for those who might be impatient, it's there are great similarities between the United States and Poland in that regard, at least. And if you want to find out what these similarities are, please stay with us till the end of the presentation. It's going to have a factual component. I'll talk a little bit about the things which sparked the whole debate about immigration and populism in Eastern Europe. That is the immigration crisis, the refugee crisis of 2015, which was a result of the first Russian invasion of Ukraine, and then the war in Syria, the escalation of war in Syria, which produced waves of refugees, immigrants, people crossing the border marching towards European Union. So that's going to be the historical context in which we will begin. Then you will see a little bit of data about that movement of people. Brief discussion of the German situation, then a segment about Hungarian situation, because Hungary was a border state and a borderline and the frontal state, which was receiving a lot of people, and which exacerbated all kinds of problems, which I'm going to talk about. And then in this context, we're going to move towards Poland and talk about the Polish situation, the Polish political culture currently, look at the issue of it, we'll look at the attitude to the issue of immigration and see how diverse these views are. There will be some data, some charts, and then we're going to talk more, and I welcome your questions, especially those who would like to find out something about East European political systems or political cultures. Hungary and Poland are not that far apart from one another in that regard, especially when you look at it from United States. That's going to be it. Yes, I was given about 45 minutes for that part. I don't mind if in the meantime you go and get the coffee or tea. I'll be talking and waiting for your questions. And in the second part, as Dr. Reitzma said, we will entertain those questions which you will send to him to the number which he announced at the very beginning of the presentation of his introduction. So here we are. Let me see if it works. Okay, now it's a familiar picture. Yes, you see this in the American news, not on daily basis, but you see those caravans of immigrants marching towards American borders. Look, this is an example of that caravan, that something like a caravan, although we never used the term, people moving towards the Hungarian border through the Balkans in that 2015. What is striking probably and strikingly different from the images that you see on American television, those people coming from Latin American countries, there's probably not a single woman in that crowd, yes, or very few women in that crowd, very few children, mostly young, able-bodied men who are called refugees who escaped from, this is from Syrian conflict, but they are from Afghanistan, they are from Bangladesh, they are from all kinds of countries that would be people who would be seeking different, better life and opportunities for them in EU. As I said, the goal of the talk is not to discuss in great detail the historical developments, but it's to explain the reasons why immigration is such a sensitive issue, and then talk about populism and compare it to the American situation. You can see the map on the left-hand side at the bottom here. You have the numbers. These are hundreds of thousands of migrants, yes, in thousands, and the countries of origin from which they were coming in that 2015, and it lasted till 2016. And these on the map, you have the routes through which they were coming. I'm going to talk in greater detail about that route from Syria through the Balkans to Hungary, the red country here, and Poland is here. As you see, Poland did not figure prominently in that. It was not a recipient of any first incomers, yet it had a very strikingly opinionated position on immigration. We'll explain why it was the case. The second map, a lot of maps, just to it has circles and colors, but it's going to alert you to the fact that you have 3 dates here. 2014, that is before the Syrian crisis, and you can see that the numbers of people coming to Western Europe mostly were high, but not that great. Then we have the 2015, this is the crisis year, when the crisis began. And then when the situation settled, this is the 2016, a year after. So it's for 3 years we witnessed the rapid increase in the number of migrants, people looking for host country in Europe. And you can look at the circles here. Each circle kind of proportionately represents the country of destination, at least as it was indicated by the migrants. And decisively here on their list is Germany, with about 60% of refugees seeking Germany as the final point of destination. Poland is non-existent for the 2016. As you can see, it belongs in that category of countries which received fewer than 2,000 petitions for asylum from refugees. It's the rich countries, the wealthy countries of Western Europe, predominantly Germany, that was the target of the movement. Here you have the number of total requests, that is, the requests were made by the people who crossed the border. It says these are not requests filed at the embassies, these are requests filed at the border. So you can see that when we say crisis, we mean a situation in which we witnessed a doubling, more than doubling of the people streaming into Europe. Yes. Now, an interesting situation developed as a result of it. Eventually, European countries, which assumed more than 2.5 million people over 2 years, much of it in Germany, as half of it, about 60% of it in Germany, as we saw. The European Union decided that it needed to close the doors to migrants, immigrants, refugees. The separation between these categories is not that easy, because almost everyone who moved away from the region where there was conflict, and Middle East and Syria was that place in the first place, but Afghanistan as another place, called themselves refugees, and therefore they sought asylum in EU countries. Those who took the land route had to cross through Turkey, and Turkey realized that this was, on one hand, this was bordering a disaster for their politics, and it was expensive and politically, and not only politically but mostly socially and economically costly. But they also realized that they had a leverage because of that. And as you can look at the figures here, Turkey decided that it agreed to hold the flood of refugees in their territory, in the camps, borders closed, but it's the Turks who control whether they open or close the border. Yes, that's a delicate issue. So each time you witness something happening in the news, like in the recent weeks when the EU delegation was in Turkey, they were not there to sip coffee and look at the beautiful Turkish historical monuments, but they were there to talk about the refugee situation and talking about money, because Turkey receives about close to $7 billion annually for maintaining those camps and maintaining the border closed. And this is Turkish leverage in Eastern Europe. That's why I call this Turkey is the European Mexico for Americans. Yes, that's it offered those services. They were received. and they give Turkey a special position in European politics at the moment. Yes, now migrations where people went. This is that. Now, when the dust settled, yes, we started asking questions about the meaning of this migration, and apart from obvious considerations of human consideration, yes, so humanitarian assistance to people who are fleeing areas where they can die any day because of the military conflict. The composition of those caravans made people question this humanitarian reason as being the principal, the sole reason for those migrations. But that's one side of the story, and I'm sure we all have reactions to this, looking at what's happening on American southern border. Now, the economic question that is related to it, and I will return to it when we are talking about Eastern Europe and Poland in particular, how economy shapes the attitudes towards migrants. I'd like you to look at the right-hand side, and look at the three scenarios which describe or try to anticipate by the year 2035. This is year 2035. This is 2015, when the influx of migrants happened, and the impact on German economy and GDP per capita, on people living in Germany, how it will affect the income of people already living in Germany. And you can see that even the pessimistic scenario has that this will barely have any significance, but the more optimistic scenario has that it will contribute at least close to 1% to the income of every German. When it comes to the German economy, this is more significant, perhaps. You can see that even though Germany was initially saying we are paying the costs of this migration, we are burdened more than any other country by this. But at the same time, the economists said, look at the data. They said, German economy is supposed to benefit from this influx of immigrants, but at least 1% on the average, maybe 1.5%. German economy is going to benefit from this because the refugees or immigrants, migrants, incoming people, they are willing to work for lower wages. They make German economy more competitive, because Germany, about 50% of its GDP depends on exports, and so it's a heavily trading country, and the influx of new immigrants who are willing to work, for a relatively low pay, is going to make German products competitive in the global market. Yes, I'd like to see that type of conversation about immigration coming to United States. I must say that at least the television narrations are very, very scarcely mention that aspect of migrations to United States. Yes, so. Now, let's move. This is Germany. Yes, this is Western Europe, the old Europe, old EU. The attitude, the migration issue presented a very important and interesting test, became a test of democratic political culture. Yes, how much are you advanced in your transition or transformation from communism, or transition from communism to liberal democracy, we will evaluate your progress based on your attitude towards immigration. That was a story in EU power chambers in those years 2015, 2016, when EU was trying to develop a policy that would distribute those newly arrived migrants more evenly among countries of EU, and I'm not sure that Eastern Europe passed this test. I think that it exposed the attitudes towards the migrants, which were exposed under this pressure, duress, and continue ever since that moment. They have not changed by much. I checked the public opinion polls, and there is no significant change in the attitudes towards migrants that were posted in those studies in 2016 as compared to what happened in what's going on in 2021. These are the, if you may have been reading the slide I showed, these are titles of articles from 2020, when the issue of migration and the how liberal are you, this question, how liberal is your democracy? The countries of Eastern Europe were asked that during the discussions about the new EU budget for the next 7 years and the special rescue package for the economy, and the distribution of those extra special funds as a rescue package for the economy hit by COVID was made contingent on evaluation of performance on the ratings as to how liberal you are, how much you resemble the values which we as a European Union, European community as such, embrace as key values. And you can look at this as these titles, and you can see that the Old West, because most of these articles come from the Western media, were pretty critical of Eastern Europe. So this issue of migration makes people in Western Europe kind of look back at what at one time Jacques Chirac, the French president, said that when East European countries during the discussions about the invasion of Iraq, American invasion in 2003, when EU countries were trying to kind of build more support for that, for collaboration with the United States. Poland was very articulate in that and sent its troops there. Jacques Chirac said that this was he was a president of France, country that was very skeptical of that military expedition. He said to countries of Eastern Europe in an open text that you just wasted an opportunity to be quiet. And that certain patronizing attitude towards Eastern Europe ever since that 2003 is present in Western media, which are waiting for an opportunity to tell the old Europe that maybe broadening or changing the borders, including those countries of Eastern Europe in the European family, was a mistake. Very critical, and it's EU, Poland, Hungary, and the fight over Brussels values. Yes, those were very harsh words of criticism, which Poland and Hungary hear from Western European partners ever since 2015. When the EU decided that the way to deal with the migration, with this influx of people, was to create a quota system that would distribute those new migrants to particular countries based on certain mathematical formula. Yes. Poland and Hungary were among the countries which most vehemently and most vocally opposed that reallocation, citing fears of Islamic terrorism. That was the official narrative, although in none of these countries we've ever had an incident of Islamic terrorism against the government or the people of those countries. The real reasons, and this is going to be the second part of the presentation, that is what are the real reasons of this negativity towards immigrants in Eastern Europe, and the cultural, historical, and psychological factors are much more important than the economic factors which are raised in public debates, except for that terrorism argument which I have just spoken about. We will return to this slide. I'm just showing you how complex the explanation is. I will talk about each of those different reasons later when we are discussing Poland, but I want to turn your attention to those cultural, psychological, and historical reasons which shape the attitude towards migrants in Eastern Europe, and the certain level of authoritarian culture, xenophobia, homogeneity of the cultures there, the lack of experience with migrations, the weak civil society and civic culture, legacy of feudalism, legacy of communism, yes, legacy of the mind frame which we call Homo Sovieticus, a certain dependency, reliance on state and welfare state, which we say is one of the inheritances of communism, but I think it reaches further in the past to feudalism. Interestingly, the negotiated exit from communism, for a long time hailed as one of the greatest accomplishments of Hungary and Poland, might play a role in the attitude towards migration, because it creates a certain syndrome which stimulates populism in Eastern Europe. That is the syndrome of unfinished revolution. And if you want, I can return to it later on. Domestic politics, the most important component of this, but also very important is the geopolitical legacy, which goes along with the legacy of history, that is being in that part of Europe which was invaded more often than any other part of Europe, through which armies of other countries marched many times back and forth, and which created a preoccupation with one's own culture at the expense of the cultures of other countries, which we see much more appreciated in the West and in the United States, for that matter, too. And another final reason is very political. That is, even when EU was chastising East European countries, Hungary and Poland in the first place, for their restrictive policy on immigration, there was mostly words and much less action. And that may have encouraged people to continue the anti-immigration policy and populistic anti-immigration policy. Uh, the the economic factor, as I said, is a kind of like a fake cover-up for this, because the economies of Eastern Europe since 2015, I'm talking about pre-COVID situation, yes, till March 2020, have been doing very well, developing at a fast pace. They even needed cheap labor from outside, just like the German economy needed it. So the loss of jobs and the increased unemployment was not really an economic, a sound, a logical economic explanation. The economic explanation that was to much greater extent true was that the immigrants could become a burden on the state welfare system. But given the fact that both Hungary and Poland, according to the relocation scheme of EU, were supposed to welcome only about Poland, that's about 10,000 immigrants, and Hungary, that was about 6,000 immigrants. The numbers, which in comparison to the populations of the country, 36, 37 in Poland and about 11 in Hungary, were not that significant, yes? On the right-hand side, what you see with highlighted Poland and Hungary is the more important reason, the cultural reason, the fear of other culture. Muslims, in this case, yes, and the unfavorable perspective on Muslims is high, but as you can see, lower than in Western European countries. So in itself, it did not constitute a grounds for this, sufficient grounds for that fear of terrorism, and that, but incited by populist politics, these numbers, which were lower than West European numbers, became in the minds of the people. People were not told that, oh, well, people in Britain are kind of hold more negative views of Muslims than we here. No, we didn't know about that. That was not a point in discussions. It's the incitement of the fear of immigrants happened very successfully, and that's a populist brand in Eastern Europe. Now, here, when we look at the chart on the left-hand side, which is again a cultural dimension of the attitude to immigrants, you will see that Poland, let's talk about Poland for a moment, it is the support for accepting refugees, the thinking about the migration. Would you oppose or support? The blue is oppose, the green is support, taking in refugees from countries, important, where people are fleeing violence and war. And the Hungary stands out as a country which was very negatively predisposed towards immigrants, 54%. Poland with 36 is second, but it's not that much different from Italy and Greece. But Italy and Greece were also, with Italy, were the countries which were countries of the first contact for refugees. So we should compare Italian and Greek figures to Hungarian. So we see the Hungarian opposition to refugees is twice as great as that of Italians and Greeks. 36% of Poles in that context becomes a larger figure, yes. To compare it with the United States, You have the United States registering 29, opposition to taking refugees from countries fleeing war. And the highest percentage, interestingly, is recorded in Israel. But that's the Palestinian issue. Yes, this is the, obviously a specific situation of Israel in the Middle East. The relocation program and the closing of the border negotiated with Turkey resulted in much lower numbers of immigrants, refugees, immigrants. Please excuse my using both terms interchangeably, although those who do research in that area will probably say that it's inexcusable. I'm talking about the people who are coming from other countries to a host country, yes, for reasons other than economic only. Look at the figures. The figures for 2019 are much lower, 10 times lower in some cases, of where they come from. Then, so it is a successful policy, expensive policy, but successful. Yes. Now, so statistics and overall analysis of the policy says that EU managed to handle the problem of immigrants from Middle East and other warring countries by adopting pretty restrictive policy, by trying to hold the refugees in the countries outside of its borders, that be it Libya or Turkey in the first place, vetting of immigrants before they come, those asylum seeking. At the same time, and for those who enter, there's a relocation program which tries to distribute the burdens associated with the new entrants more equitably. Yes, proportionately to the strength, to the size of the EU economies and the number of population. Now, these two cases that I will talk in greater detail at the moment, although, well, Poland in particular, Hungary, just as a case study of the worst case study. This is the worst situation. You have 3 slides from 2015, the Hungarian-Serbian border on the right-hand side at the bottom. The Hungarian-Austrian border, this is the version of the wall, yes, that you have in the United States on the southern border. This is barbed wire, makeshift wall, because this is the same EU. Austria is in EU, Hungary is in EU. Both are Schengen countries. The travel is free. You don't need a passport. You just use your regular ID that you would be using in domestic affairs. So once a refugee or immigrant or an alien comes to a Schengen country, it's very difficult to monitor their movement afterwards. It's like monitoring movement of migrants inside the United States among different countries. Yes, in fact, just a few days ago, we saw the governor of North Dakota in the news who vehemently opposed the federal policy or the proposed policy of the Biden administration that they will be distributing those illegal aliens who cross the border and are held in detention centers in the south at the moment, and they are overflowing, and they will be moving them, that's the intention of the administration, into different states of the United States. And governor of North Dakota said that will happen over her dead body. She doesn't have a decisive voice in that, but that to me, someone who came from Europe, sounded very much like Hungary and Poland, telling this to Brussels, that over our dead body will we accept the immigrants, even those who are supposed to come under the agreed quota system, which Polish and Hungarian government put their signature on underneath. So that's the caravan. But this caravan is not marching into Hungary. This is Hungarian leverage of kind of, or a message to Western Europe. Yes, we could hold them in camps and do the vetting and maybe have some control over the flow of immigrants on our territory, but it's our decision. If we don't do this, we will just let them go. We will say, you're free to stay. They will not, Orban is the name of Hungarian prime minister. He was very smart explaining this policy. He says, no, I'm not, I don't want to hold them in camps. I will just let them go free. Let them settle wherever they want. And they don't want to settle in Hungary. We saw Hungary, that is an intended country destination for less than 2,000 of those immigrants from the hundreds of thousands that expressed intention to settle in Europe. Hungary is not the point of destination. Richer countries of Western Europe, Austria, Germany, the Netherlands, France, are their destination, and this is what happens. And again, look at the picture. You don't see any women or children in those among those immigrants, and so these are the quotas, yes, which I was talking about. And look at the Hungary. That's almost nothing. There's 10,000 is here, yes. The quota system. Poland agreed to accept about 12, 11, but not full 12,000 immigrants who wanted to settle in Poland. For Hungary, that number is much smaller. Obviously, this is Germany here. These are low figures, yes, because it's the intention was to stop to close the borders and stop the influx of immigrants to Europe. Now that's a interesting picture. Yes, at the top left, you see Angela Merkel, German Chancellor, and Viktor Orban, the Hungarian Prime Minister. He has a reputation of populist nationalist who is often quoted, often presented as a destroyer of liberal democracy, and he did a lot in Hungary to deserve such term. Yes. At the same time, and Germany is the champion of liberal democracy, a guardian of European values. These two people should by no means be in any cozy relationship, because there is a huge rift between them when it comes to European values, the respect for those values. Yet, when we come to economic issues, this criticism of Hungary and Orban personally by Merkel and other leaders of old Europe did not have much influence on German investment in Hungary, and particularly the car industry, which continued opening factories in Hungary, which produce either automobiles or parts for automobiles. And this is European Ford. Yes, this is not American Ford, but European Ford, and all others are. Opel is General Motors, but that's again a European brand of this. Now it's owned by the French. And Viktor Orban at the bottom, happy, saying thumbs up, business as usual. So yes, we know you will be critical of us and you will use very negative language. We're patient. We will withstand this pressure, and then we will offer you very sweet investment deals, which we know that you will like and you will take advantage of. Look, what is circled around this is on the left hand side. You have it's the economy, stupid. Yes, it's not the values. It's the economy that is most important. If you put on the scales, on one scale economy, on another value, it seems like Hungary and to some extent Poland figured EU out and said, when you offer them good economic incentives, they will backtrack on values. This is just rhetorics. And on the left-hand side, you have a list of German automotive companies which invested in Hungary, which have a stake in Hungarian economy. And on the right-hand side, you see the dependency of Germany. Germany's most important trading partners, and Eastern Europe is the dominant one here, is a crucial trading partner for Germany. So that seems to be explaining this is how the populists of Eastern Europe approach those value intensive, let's say, West European countries. They have charts like this and say, well, you won't hurt, you will not want to hurt your economy too much. Yes. So this, if you go on into internet and Google up authoritarianism, illiberal democracy, threat to democracy, books about Hungary, there's about 30 books right now that you can buy, which will explain how dreadful the condition of liberal democracy in Hungary is. Yes, the term illiberal democracy or illiberal democratic system seems to be a synonym of Hungary today, oligarchic, all kinds of criticisms. But it, as I say, doesn't change much in terms of doing business with Hungary. Just a word of explanation from the Hungarian perspective. I will not be explaining their rationale for their anti-immigration policy, because to a great extent it's very similar to the Polish case, which I will be talking about in a moment. But the most important thing in Hungary, I think, is in this populist nationalism is a uses of history. And Hungary sees itself as a victim of history. In 1920, the post-World War II treaty, the kind of following the Versailles Treaty, Hungary was a part of Austro-Hungarian Empire, so it was on the losing end of the war, and it lost about 65 to 70% of its territory. You can see it on the map, to the neighboring countries, and about the same part of their population. And this syndrome of Trianon, of betrayal, of loss, of being a victim, is very strongly exploited by Orban, just as it is similar things are exploited by Polish elites. And it's used as an argument against more welcoming immigration policy, because Hungarians say our primary obligation, if we have any obligation to people outside of our borders, it is first of all to Hungarians living in those neighboring countries. We want to reintegrate them. We want to keep them in touch with Hungary. Hungary has very preferential policies for for people of Hungarian origin living in Slovakia, Romania, Serbia, or Croatia. They get a lot of welfare privileges, free education, and all kinds of free healthcare in Hungary, as long as they can document their Hungarian origins. The card. Poland is doing the same to Poles living abroad, although in the Polish case, the historical legacy will have a slightly different angle, and you will see it in a moment. Yes. Okay, if I go to this, maybe I will show you at this moment. I will show you a very short film, just a minute or something. But that film illustrates this, where Hungarians are concerned with the people living in neighboring countries whom they lost. They stayed in those countries when Hungary's size shrank, even though Polish borders also shifted after the Second World War this time. But it's not the major issue here. Poles think of themselves as victims of history, probably as strongly as Hungarians. But in our case, the border issue is represented by this short film, which will, what you will see is the changeability of Polish borders in the 1,000 years of Polish history. I think it's one of the best films that you could make in order to alert people to the specificity of history of a country in Eastern Europe on flatlands through which armies of enemies marched back and forth throughout history. So what I will do at the moment, and I will share this film with you. Okay, sorry, I just have to double check that I have the sound. Yes, I have the sound. So this is that short film. Please enjoy. This is 1,000 years of Poland's history seen through the changed border. This is Poland today. As you could see, there were times for 123 years, in fact, when Poland disappeared from the maps of Europe. But the changeability of those borders from mid 16th to late 15th, mid 16th century, Poland was the largest, the most powerful country in Europe. Yes, it was a superpower by European standards, and then its decline started, and eventually we were partitioned between Germany or Prussia, Austria, and Russia, and this creates enormous sensitivity to nationalist themes of sovereignty, themes of independence, themes of no one is going to dictate to us what we are supposed to do. We are extremely alert to such messages. And it's very easy to incite Polish nationalism by pointing to policies, at the moment EU policies on immigration, as policies that are imposed on Poland by an external force. Even though we are a part of EU, in this case, EU Brussels is an external force, almost like Moscow or Vienna in 19th century, or Berlin. Yes. Now, I will try to move faster through this. The interesting thing is that Poles seem to be a pretty hypocritical people, because throughout Polish history, and especially in the 19th and 20th century, when there were disturbances, wars, or crises on Polish territory, uprisings, most of them failed uprisings, all of them, in fact, yes, loss of sovereignty, loss of independence, and Poles were emigrants. We emigrated to Western Europe, and found refuge there. But the memory of that, the last wave of so-called refugees or immigrants from Poland, happened in 1981, when in communist Poland we had a martial law imposed, which imposed a much stricter authoritarian rule on Polish territory, and a lot of people who were engaged in Solidarność, the civil rights movement, the labor rights movement, who, well, they escaped the country, stayed in the West and sought refuge, and were welcomed by Western countries, yes, even United States. And there is no memory of that. And if there is memory of that, this memory does not make us view immigration through the prism of reciprocity. So we were in need of assistance from others many times in history. Now it's our turn to give assistance to others who are in similar situation. This is almost totally absent in public discourse in Poland. Yes. And it's interesting, yes, and some people call it duplicity or hypocrisy of Poles, and short memory or selfishness of Poles. On the left-hand side, you have the percentage of people who were born in that country and now live abroad. Yes, in case of Poland, this is 11% of the Polish population. That's a large number, yes. But it doesn't make us predisposed more favorable towards immigrants. Doesn't immunize us from populistic discourse and from incitement of animosity towards immigrants. These are the attitudes towards immigration that you can see. The concern for the immigration, that's immigration from outside of EU. This is the light blue, yes, the light blue color. Are you concerned? Is that a problem? And on the right-hand side is that how we treat that. This is important, that we consider immigrants today, this was 2015, during the time of that crisis developing, that they are a burden for our country. So the ground is fertile for anti-immigrant sentiments. And now you will see in 2 slides, 2 different groups. Culture wars in Poland, the polarization over the issue of immigration. This slide is showing anti-immigrant banners during demonstrations which opposed that quota policy that EU was proposing. Left-hand side, it says Poland has always been and will forever be a Slavic country. It will never be an Islamic country. Stop Islamization, Islamization, this one. Mohammed not welcome, that's in English, so you see, so you can see. This one is interesting, and I will mention it in a moment. Ukraine, yes, Ukraine won, go away. We don't want even Ukrainians, who are a very important part of our economy. But there are also people on the other side of the spectrum, people who welcome immigrants. These are those who passed the test on liberal are you liberal democratic? Yes, we are. And you can see these slogans are not very different from the ones which you would see in United States in demonstrations regarding immigrants, or for instance what happened in 2017 when Donald Trump imposed a ban on immigration from from 6 or 7 Islamic countries. And here it says, you're welcome, refugees welcome, and all these things in Polish say that the immigrants are welcome, and this is a living proof of this. Uber Eats, yes, people distributing food, most of them are from Bangladesh or Sri Lanka in Poland. That's a strange reason why they would be from there in such numbers. Now, Poland found a very interesting and convenient excuse when Polish Prime Minister Beata Szydło in 2016 was pressured by Western European allies. Open up, accept the refugees. Why do you have so few of them? She would say, we have plenty. We have about 1 million of them. How come, they say? Ukrainians. We treat Ukrainians as refugees from war zone. Technically, that's correct, because this is after Ukraine was invaded by Russia. But 99% of Ukrainians who are in Poland, they are in Poland working as, they are there for economic reasons. That's like, they come for a job, temporary immigrants, make money, go back to the country. They don't want to settle in Poland. They are there just for the jobs. And we are the border, or we are the neighbor of Ukraine. This is a very lively border, and there's a lot of them, but not 1 million. She exaggerated. Yes, this is about 250,000 official. We don't have precise data on that, but we have the data on see, this is Polish, official Polish statistics, and it says immigrants, yes. Temporary workers are not immigrants, but Polish government, this populist nationalist government, will take that chart to Brussels and say, look, don't criticize us for not fulfilling the quota system. We have 1 million of immigrants from Ukraine, immigrants, but they are not immigrants, yes. They are temporary workers who go back and forth through the border. What is important, they contribute about 11% of the growth of Polish economy, according to the statistics. Today, almost everywhere you go, you meet Ukrainians in service industry, cleaning, those lower paying jobs, picking fruit. Ukrainians are everywhere. Yes. Now, this is the film that I wanted to show you. Now, to the explanations, a little bit at least about that. I've already spoke about some of these things. Poland always boasted of being a very friendly country, tolerant, I would say, rather tolerant towards others, towards minorities. And that is true in the Jagiellonian Poland in 16th and 15th century. Welcomed Jews who were exiled, forcibly exiled from Western Europe. We welcomed religious minorities when there were religious conflicts in Western Europe, and we incorporated the Muslims in Poland, the Turkish minority, the Tatars, Ukrainians, the Russian Orthodox. That's true. They all had a place in Polish society, and with relative peace between those minorities, but never equality when it comes to status. That was this. The Polish meaning of the word tolerance is, okay, I'm tolerating you here. Yes, you can live, but I will not grant you equal status. Or even if I say that you have an equal status, politically, formally, you may have this equal status, but in reality, there is an undercoating of superiority and patronizing attitude towards minorities. That's inherited from the past. Even though Polish culture, Poland is a homogeneous country today. About 97% of people living in Poland are Polish by origins, identifying with Roman Catholic religion as a strong component of our identity. It is not endangered by any large, sizable groups of minorities. The largest minority of a different religion that we accepted as refugees were Chechens after both of the Chechen wars, and that's about 20-some thousand Chechens. That was very generous, and then at that time, but the governments which ruled Poland were not populist nationalists at that moment. The inequalities inherited from feudalism. Yes, we are a peasant society. We are a society of people who think that we are poorer than we actually are. We are among the OECD. We are in the group of OECD countries, the 27 richest countries in the world. But we don't think of ourselves this way. We don't think that our success and transformation creates any obligation to share that wealth or to welcome into that wealth others who are less fortunate. We think, no, we are still far behind, comparing ourselves to Germans, where salaries are 3 times higher than in Poland. Yes, and the GDP of Germany being almost twice as large as that of Poland. Poland is surpassed Portugal and Greece and south of Italy in the pre-COVID time. So we are catching up with the West, but in our minds, we still deserve to be treated specially in a unique way. We should not be, the West should not be making demands of us, just as it does with this liberal democracy, because it's a new system. We are only learning. We are adjusting to it. Yes, give us time. This is the message coming from Poland. We have to equalize our status with the West, and then then maybe, yes, but that's, who knows when it will happen. Yes, some people say that will be 2045 if that Poland may catch up with Germany in terms of GDP per capita, and that's provided that that the levels of development remain at a similar level. So that Homo Sovieticus mind frame in Polish society, that we deserve special treatment, We deserve to be taken care of by the government. We don't have much initiative into how we organize our own life around us. It may not be dominant, but it is sizable. It is big enough to fuel populism, to give support to populists, to nationalist populists who use that syndrome very successfully and threaten or frighten people. Say, if we have more immigrants, that will deplete our resources, which we make available to people in the welfare resources. Yes, these immigrants, that's a very American argument. Yes, they do not deserve access to our welfare system and benefits. We have barely enough for ourselves. Yes. The elites, this is interesting, and that's a troublesome point here. I mentioned 1981, the martial law. What preceded this was a year and a half almost of a rise of anti-communist movement in Poland, which produced labor union, independent, autonomous labor union, which was very critical of communist authorities, which was called Solidarność. Its name is solidarity. This is what it translates to. Solidarity with whom? You would say, you would think with other people in a similar situation, yes? But Western elites, and it's like Jacques Chirac said it, yes, but there's Noam Chomsky, an American philosopher, yes, a liberal leftist philosopher, said he was shocked. Chomsky says it in an interview when Václav Havel, a Czech president, a dissident, a person who was associated with the best features of East European character, the love of freedom and respect for liberal values, the Western liberal values. Václav Havel came to United States, and he was delivering a speech to a joint session of Congress. And just a few days before that speech in Salvador, Archbishop Romero and several priests were slaughtered, shot dead in churches by the death squads of the right-wing governments, which were supported by United States. And Chomsky says a thing like this. And he listened to Havel, this champion of solidarity, also those, not the Polish solidarity, but of that syndrome, of that thinking, yes, solidarity with other people who suffer under authoritarianism. And there was nothing of solidarity in Havel's message, Chomsky says. He was disgusted by Chomsky praising United States as a country that is the champion of freedom and the beacon of hope, the shining city on a hill, all those things, and not mentioning Salvador even once in his speech. And Chomsky started thinking why it was the case, and he coined the term East European exceptionalism, that the elites, the dissident, the anti-communist elites in Eastern Europe kind of developed because they were pampered by Western governments, and as those who were creating a rift in the bloc, and those who were the shiny beacon of Western values in Eastern Europe, and so on and so forth, this type of arguments, that they never developed sensitivity towards people in other countries in the similar situation. They always focused narrowly on the anti-communist struggle, on the struggle with communism and with the Soviet system and Russia and Soviet Union then as an oppressor. And probably that by trickle down, it went also down to the populations of Eastern Europe, that we have hard time identifying with the plight of refugees from Syria, although we may recognize the tragic situation in which they are, but then we point a finger to the West and say that's their responsibility. Let them handle it first. We are still behind. We are not we shouldn't be on the forefront of countries which are helping you. Yes, because we still deserve development first, and then solidarity, if I were to put thing like this. The negotiated exit, that reason. Let me speak about this. Hungary and Poland, two countries which, and I will be finishing in a second, Richard, and to apologies to all of you because I've been talking for more than 45 minutes. The unfinished revolution syndrome. In 1989, we praised Hungary and Poland for the peaceful, non-violent exit from communism, negotiated, which resulted in the fact that we don't have a memory of a moment when we would hang our flag or destroy Lenin's monument, or put our flag replace the communist flag with the Polish flag, with the torn piece which was put onto the communist flag, which the Polish flag didn't change from the communist times to the post-communist times. We don't have a memory of that moment that would be the pivotal moment. This is the revolution. This is where the change began. This is where we were all heroic and we rejected communism. We don't have memory of that. We have the round table talks, we have negotiations, we have peaceful exit, semi-free elections, then free elections, gradualism in our exit in the year 89-90. And those right-wing nationalists are exploiting this. And they are saying, we need to finish that revolution. We need to focus on domestic politics, purging communists wherever they would be. Not many of them, and that's a different story, but they are finding communists in places where they literally are not. But any institution, for instance, that was started during the communist times, like the Constitutional Tribunal, is considered communist. So it deserves to be abolished or undermined or challenged, because we have to finish the revolution. This creates preoccupation with domestic politics. There's a lack of interest in global affairs, lack of interest in those humanistic concerns, with humanitarian concerns with others, because we are finishing the revolution. That's what the post-communist, that's what those populist nationalists are saying to the people. And they are using migrants, immigration, the issue of immigration, as an element of policy that is imposed on Poland from outside. Yes, so this heightened sensitivity to sovereignty, they also use it to incite nationalism. Brussels will not dictate to us. Even worse, Berlin will not be telling us what to do. We are sovereign and independent. And EU values, yes, but selectively. First development, then values. And since there is no punishment for non-adherence to the values, the EU is proving to be pretty inefficient, except for the rhetorical level. There is no fear that we will actually be severely punished for not adhering to EU values and the quota system for immigrants. Yes, so and the civil society, the groups of people who congregate and support immigrants and say, you're welcome, that's too weak to be a sufficient force against the populists who control the instruments of government. There was there was this negative attitude towards immigrants is not necessarily firmly entrenched. This is just words of optimism. Because if you look at this chart from 2014, from before the immigration, from before the time when populist nationalists captured power in Poland, the Law and Justice Party, they are called. Look at the response to that question and compare it to Germany or Sweden. Sweden is a model West European country, yes? Select groups that you would not like to have as neighbors. And in Poland, the immigrants or foreign workers, the purple or the tan or the purple line, the orange or is just 7 or 8%, much lower than in Germany. So negativity is not present there. We are slightly more negative than Swedes, yes, but still, this is a very, very low result. What the chart doesn't show, that the question in that survey when it asked about immigrants from Muslim countries, that negativity was much higher at the level of 34. But in case of Germany, then it jumped over 50%. So before the populists came to power, Poland was one of the most pro-immigration countries in Europe. It seemed like those liberal democratic values were quite firmly entrenched in Polish political culture. We scored the highest in Europe in the European Social Survey, asking about the government should generous judging applications for refugee status of people. Something happened, yes? Something happened. Populism happened. Polish Roman Catholic Church, which has a very important role in shaping the mentality of Poles. Initially in 2015, when the refugee crisis started brewing and it became truly a crisis, a few bishops and archbishops from the hierarchy, initially, they proposed a solution like this: one refugee family for one parish. We are rich enough, we are generous enough, we are humanitarian, we will welcome refugees. This is consistent with the survey that I just showed you a moment ago. All those voices, in 2 weeks' time, this policy was gone. No one dared propose anything like this ever again. Those few open-minded hierarchs were silenced by the rest of the church elite, and this very logical policy, I don't know if it had a chance of being implemented, but this is pre-populist government times. Yes, it looked like an excellent solution, but it didn't transpire. So, are we open to refugees? This is the 2016, the populist government. Our attitudes change. We say, would you should accept refugees coming from Middle East and Africa? No, we do not accept. 70%, it's a 7, but there should be a 0. 70% of Poles say no, we are not going to, we should not, it's not our obligation. Yes. The attitude towards Ukrainians is different, much more welcoming. Do we agree that Poland should accept Ukrainian refugees from that's about 60% say yes. And we can talk about reasons for that. So politics matters. The conclusion from the data and from what we see in the media and in attitudes of people in surveys is that a great role is played by who runs the country and who the leader of the country is and the narrative. It's easy to incite nationalism, but it's a not lost cause to find those pro-immigration, pro-liberal democratic values in Poland. And this is my last slide because it's comparing situation to United States. And I'm finding eerie similarities when it comes to those who are anti-immigration or at least cautious towards immigration in United States and in Hungary and Poland. And if we can go very briefly through these points, so you will see why I'm concluding that the similarities are eerie. In East European countries and USA, unlike in Western Europe, the anti-immigrant sentiments were incited by the parties coming in the mainstream, the ruling parties, the parties which actually had a real stake in controlling the government. In most of West European countries, those anti-immigration voices come from the periphery, from fringes. They are growing, yes. In Austria, they were even a part of the ruling coalition, but they were ostracized. The Austrian government was ostracized for that reason. In Eastern Europe and USA, the populists found sufficient electoral support in a very similar group of people, less educated, rural, small town, evangelical people. Very similar in United States and Eastern Europe when it comes to who is more anti-immigration. Polarization in United States and tribalism and the disappearance of the center, very similar in the United States and Polish and Hungarian politics. The economic issue is not stressing the loss of jobs and joblessness, and no, but it's stressing burden on social services. Very similar. Top leadership, people who are front page persons. They, like Donald Trump, obviously here, I mean Donald Trump, but also some of the Republican leaders, the Tea Party people from the Republican Party, whom you see in the news all the time. The same is in Poland, that anti-immigration sentiments are championed from the television screen, from the mainstream, from the people who occupy very important positions in the system. Sorry for the typo. They are propagated by the broadcasters. You have Fox News here, or Newsmax in the new Trump's platform. You have Polish national television, which is in the hands of the ruling populists, which is spreading the anti-immigration sentiments all the time. And this is an extremely powerful force, similar to the strength of the message in the United States media. Yes. Border security, that's another issue which is similar, another dimension of the problem in the discourse about immigration. Border security for Hungary in the first place, but also important in Poland, less than in Hungary, I have to say that. And the not in my backyard message, or not now, yes, not yet. Not now, not here, not them, not by your decision. Yes, in principle, yes, immigrants and refugees deserve our consideration, but for some reason, not now. Yes, in Polish case, this is the backwardness, the need to catch up, the Homo Sovieticus syndrome. Yes, the not fully consolidated liberal values of democracy. In American case, this is libertarian views. This is states' rights, things which you know very well. And as I just said, the governor of North Dakota said, "Overheard that body." Yes, so these similarities. I'm sorry, this is, as I said, my last slide, and maybe they will inspire some discussion or questions and comments. I would like to welcome them from the audience, and sorry for going for so long. And Richard was not, and moderators were not interfering, so I don't know why, but now I'm done. Thank you very much for your attention, and if you have any comments or questions, I'm open to answering them. Will be my pleasure. Thank you.
Well, Bohdan, thank you for this interesting presentation. It's hard to get a word in edgewise sometimes, but it was very interesting. And we have actually a question from a viewer in Mexico, so I have to translate the question a second. But she says that without a doubt, migrations will continue to increase in the coming years because of the social and economic consequences of the pandemic of COVID and the rise in populist politics. At the same time, these populist governments and nationalist governments are on the rise across. What do you see as happening on a broader scale around the globe in terms of the continued increase in both migration pressures and the rise of populist nationalist governments?
Well, I lost you for a moment, but I think you repeated the main thrust of the argument. That's going generally. Yes, I think that what we've learned, I think a part of the discussion about immigration policy in the global scale was intensified exchange of information, how to make immigration more difficult. Like, look at how many countries are now using Australia as an example. Australia, which has a very restrictive immigration policy, in the discourse of, it is present in Poland. I don't know Hungarian, so I can't tell you to what extent it's present in Hungary, but it's present in EU discussions about immigration. There's better vetting, holding people abroad in the countries before they come to EU. It seems like there is an agreement that this is the policy, that we have to model ourselves on those more restrictive countries. And COVID, I don't think it has changed anything. I don't think it has made anyone more open towards accepting immigrants from economically deprived areas. I think it is causing the reverse effect, because those pictures which I started with, the caravans of young males who are coming as refugees, those pictures are inciting very this restrictive door towards more restrictive policy, even in the heads of the people who otherwise would be open to humanitarian concerns. Even if boats sink in the Mediterranean, and from time to time we hear reports about boats sinking and 100 people drowning, for instance, children, including children and women. I think the core of European attitudes towards migration hardened, and COVID is not going to change much in that situation. And I think we are the Trump system or the Turkish system, pay others to hold the migrants on their territory and then vet those, and those who truly qualify for asylum, we will let them in. But there is also something which no one will tell you publicly, but we say, okay, we've accepted enough. So there's, you notice the figures which I had in one of the slides that had the 10 times lower number of asylum people accepted for with asylum in 2019 compared to 2016. This is the effect of hardening of the core. Even those who would be liberally predisposed and who would have humanitarian considerations drive them, they face the danger of populists in Western Europe, France, Netherlands, Britain, Italy, and all over Eastern Europe, in every East European country. And I'm not optimistic when it comes to opening to migrants. If an institution, such institution as a Roman Catholic Church in Poland, very powerful, which would have as an important voice in shaping the immigration policy, it is silent. There is nothing from the church on this humanitarian tone. And I frankly speaking, it may be saddening to the person who asked the question. I really didn't see any serious consideration that COVID and was going to change anything in immigration policy of EU at least.
Do you think that COVID will have a later effect as a result of the economic devastation that it has wrought in some countries? In other words, that once globally we recover from the pandemic, we will see increased immigration pressures?
Those pressures will exist for the next 100 years, unfortunately, I think. I don't know if we will be, what the richer countries are doing and will be doing, yes, they will be buying their clear conscience with vaccines, with humanitarian aid there in the countries of origin of migration. And I think this is going to be the policy. Will there be more strict policing? I think there will be. There will be, and if COVID accentuates differences, it will only make situation more tense, but not more willing towards openness. Conflict.
So,
Yes.
yeah. So do you think that Europe, and perhaps to a lesser degree the United States, see financial investment in countries of origin as a way to stem the tide of migration?
Absolutely. Just like Kamala Harris going to Guatemala and other countries in Latin American region to talk about boosting their economies. The same thing. This is the solution of the rich. It's often a solution of the rich. Yes, use the money to alleviate the conditions, to help a little bit. But we know that it's not going to be an efficient policy. So it will continue producing surges of immigration, of pressure, of migration pressure on the rich countries. And I don't really see a solution to it.
So do you think, well, let me ask you instead, Pope Francis has articulated pro-immigrant policies from the status of the hierarchy of the church. What is the Polish church's then reaction to his perspective on this?
He's misguided. He doesn't know what he's talking about. He has wrong advice. Pope Francis this is very interesting, but we had our own Polish Pope, yes, John Paul II, and through his pontificate, he produced a lot of documents and encyclicals, and it is possible, just like in the writings of the founding fathers, or like in the Bible itself, you can always find a passage that conveniently fits into your approach, your policy. Yes, either be it eye for an eye or whatever. And the same is going on with John Paul II's message to us. When it comes to Pope Francis, among the liberal, pro-Western values Catholics, he's very strongly appreciated. He's the good Pope. Yes, the message is regarded as very welcome. That's how we should all think. But that's not the Polish Church hierarchy, which is conservative and nationalistic. It is, if it, I'm not saying that it's disregarding the Pope, but it's not holding the Pope in high esteem. It's kind of waiting for him to move on. Yes, I'm using a kind word. Yes, move on. And it's a striking difference in the attitude to the Pope between John Paul II and Pope Francis, and he's sidelined in the Polish Roman Catholic Church by the hierarchy, more by the hierarchy than by the churchgoers themselves. We are going through a period of secularization at the moment. Yes, Polish churches and Catholic churches in trouble over molestations, over pedophilia, LGBTQ things, and gays in the church. It's not probably going to be as bad as in Ireland, for example, but we are definitely going in the direction of secularization. But the church is pursuing a policy of marriage with the secular rule, with the government. The very close relations with the currently governing conservative populist elite, and they have very good relations with the Roman Catholic Church, almost as if the church disregarded its own parishioners. Those liberals are kind of said, there's not too many of you, we are not afraid what you think. Yes.
Right. Do you see then the policies that we hear about in the United States, the anti-LGBTQ policies, do you see that as part of the same political game in Poland?
Absolutely. This is typical populist game. Yes, finding an enemy. Externally, you can't use EU as the enemy as openly as you would like to do it, because you're milking EU for 80-100 billion dollars in the upcoming budget. Yes, so EU is the benefactor here. So we cannot be too openly anti-EU. So we're finding substitute issues. The issues which EU stands for: immigration, LGBTQ rights. Yes, when you go against them, it's kind of a substitute. Instead of being anti-EU, I'm anti a fragment of EU value structure, and that's enough.
Well, thank you, Bohdan, for your interesting analysis. Usually we try to end these conversations with something hopeful, which is often challenging. So I wonder, however, if you have any hopeful perspective on any of the things that you've talked about in terms of migration. Oh, thank goodness, because I'd like to end our last session for the semester on a hopeful note. So please.
I do, but it's not. But it's the volatility of the views of the public which is willing to follow the leaders, the elites. And there is about 30% hardcore of the anti-immigration, anti-EU, anti-LGBTQ, anti-minorities people. But that's only about 30% of the population. And we see it in voting patterns. And so you noticed how quickly we went from embracing refugees to rejecting refugees based on a change in the government. If there is a reversal and we have a pro-immigration, pro-liberal democracy government come to power, if it is careful, it has to be careful. Yes, it cannot immediately say now we will be practicing open border policy, and that's not going to work. But carefully returning to the mainstream, to the good values, liberal democratic values, I think they are possible, because a part of the legacy of the past of communism and feudalism is a willingness to follow the leaders and not question the leaders if their policies do not step on my toes too much. So that's optimistic in terms of pragmatism. I see that there is some pragmatism that pro-immigration groups can exploit, but they have to do it carefully. If they go too fast, that's not going to work.
Well, pragmatism is a good note to end on. So thank you, Bohdan, for your enlightening conversation. Again, this will be recorded, well, has been recorded and will be available on our webpage for Borders and Migrations. And Bohdan, you can feel free to share that once we have it uploaded. And I want to thank our viewers for attending our final Borders and Migrations event for 2021 spring semester. And I look forward to hosting more events with all of you in the fall of 2021. Check out our webpage for this as well. Margaret, if you have anything else you'd like to add about Kosciuszko Foundation, Polish Chair, other events that you all are hosting? You're muted. Margaret, you're muted.
Okay.
There we go.
Oh, hi. I'm not muted now. So, yes, there's another event that is being hosted by Damon with the support of the Polish Chair, which is on May 3rd. But I think it's at 6 o'clock. The only thing is I don't have a link right now. You kind of caught me by surprise.
Sorry.
Yeah. So we can post that actually that link on your website, and therefore people will have access to it anytime. So it's on May 3rd, if I'm not mistaken, at 6 o'clock.
Okay, and the subject is teaching democracy in post-authoritarian, in the post-communist world, and Poland will be an example for some broader reflection perhaps. And that's going to be, for those who got tired and bored by my lecturing, that's going to be more of a discussion. Yes, I will have some lead there, but it will be a discussion with distinguished scholars who have had experience teaching democracy outside of United States as well as in the US. So you're more than cordially welcome to come to that event, and then you may start thinking about questions.
Yeah, I kind of missed the important part of the information. Bohdan Szklarski is the keynote speaker for that event. So thank you so much for helping out here, promoting the event. Appreciate it.
Well, we look forward to that event. And I just would like to note the international aspect of this particular talk, as many of our talks have been, from Poland to the United States, to Mexico, a very global form of discussion about global issues that sometimes don't seem to impact us, but are in fact both local and global. So thank you all. And thanks to my tech guru, Corey Chervin, who's made all of this possible for an entire year. This is his last obligation in this regard, and I appreciate his help in that, and hope that our future endeavors will be equally successful. So thank you all.
Thank you.